Welcome to How Not to Start a Fashion Brand. Today, we will be discussing the 80-20 split principle and how to apply that to range planning. I'm Nicole. I'm the assistant fashion designer at Cloak Agency, and I'm joined by Yvi, who is the head of design at Cloak Agency, as well as Brendan, who is an industry consultant and will be speaking about his experience with the 80-20 split principle. Brendan, can you explain what this principle is and why it's so useful for brands when they are busy with range planning?
So for context, it's known as the Pareto Principle. As far as I know, it can be applied to many disciplines or many areas, but I found it very useful when building an assortment. Just a disclaimer, it's worth mentioning that the 80-20 split we're talking about for now applies to your inventory. So how much stock you are producing for your range.
What kind of styles would you say belong in the 80% category?
Your 80% category should be built up with core. An example of a core item, I'm going to use like a big retailer, for example, would be your t-shirts. But for niche brands, this might look slightly different. You'll only know over time which are your core pieces. If you're starting your first collection, it's important to base this 80% off proper research. So looking at who your competitors are, what sort of items they're putting out into the marketplace, and then building the 80% around those items. Essentially, the items that land in the 80% are going to be the accessible ones.
Why do you think that so many startups neglect these core items when they are busy range planning, and why they make the mistake of going straight for niche or trendy items?
There's a few variables here. The only reason I would be exposed to this sort of stuff is because I've worked alongside planners. In a big retail environment, you have buyers and planners who work side by side. The planners are numbers driven and the buyers are product driven. Them feeding off one another the entire time, this is where that information comes from. Someone starting up wouldn't be exposed to that kind of knowledge. So that would be the first one. A second example would be that you might have like this romanticized idea of what your brand would look like and what the product should look like. And it's not to say that it shouldn't have niche items featured in the range. It's just saying you need to have the money makers as well. From like a marketing point of view, you could focus on these niche items, but the stock inventory, the weight is carried in the more accessible items. So your sure sellers. So say for instance, I'm exposed to a brand, I see their items online. I'm like, oh, that's such a cool top. And like, it brings me in to go look at the rest. Then maybe after looking, I'm like, okay, no, that's a bit like out there, but I really like this brand's identity. I want to support them. And then you'll end up leaving with a plain t-shirt or something like that.
In my experience with startup brands, that's exactly the thing, the romanticized idea. Often they would be someone who either they cannot find what they're looking for and they realize there's a gap in the market, or they would have just had this dream of starting a brand. And within this brand, they want to cram in all of these things they've visualized. One of our big problems when we're dealing with startup brands is trying to break away from that fantasy and focusing more on what will sell. There is also a balance that needs to be made. I think that is where it does tie back to 2080 splits. Maybe for startups, one could look at a 50-50 split, since they do start with less styles than an established brand would be putting out every season. Obviously, for them to reach their target market, they need something that is super interesting so that when influencers are pushing it, people will go, oh my God, I need this. But with time, that needs to change as they start building up a sales history. That is where this becomes complicated when you are dealing with startups, because you want to strike the right balance. And it's hard to tell from the beginning where the balance is, but it's also extremely important to remain realistic. And you don't want to crush someone's dreams, but you also don't want to see them putting their life savings and their heart and soul into something that could potentially fail because of the lack of realism.
So Brendan, if someone is in the phase of starting their range planning, what is one key takeaway that you'd want them to remember from this principle?
I would say that this applying this principle is there to help or there to assist. It's not there to put up roadblocks or speed bumps or whatever. So this principle is about mitigating risk. We've spoken about the 80-20 split being for inventory, but when building the range assortment, you can flip the 80-20 to the other side. If you're looking at the amount of styles in the range, say there's 10 styles in total, 8 of those styles can be risky, but 2 of those styles will be core. And then when you're planning your quantities on those 8 styles, you produce smaller quantities, but on the 2 styles, you produce more of your inventory. But that maybe feels a bit high grade. We could leave it at that.
Brendan, that's interesting and important information you shared. It's information that is missing in the resources for startup brands. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even think it's widely discussed in even fashion education. If I can add just one last thing, I think another resource that a fresh startup can use is the assistance of trend forecasting platforms such as WGSN, who do trend research on current sales and projections on what will be trending in the next few years.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below and please don't forget to like and subscribe.